Prynawn croeso I cyfarfod. Good afternoon and welcome to today's Neighbourhood Services, Countryside and Planning Scrutiny Committee of Monday, 7th of November 2022. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. Agenda item number 1. Apologies for absence. Democratic Services, have we any apologies for absence been received, please?
David Jones has received apologies.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to council tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Members' Code of Conduct. Are there any members who wish to make a declaration of interest for any agenda items being discussed today? No? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 3, scrutiny referrals. Both the chair and the performance and scrutiny officer are not in today, and I'm unaware of any scrutiny referrals. Agenda item number 4, biodiversity and green space management. Today's report has been written by Tom Bramley and Gillian Hampson, and the Cabinet Member Councillor David Hughes will now give a brief summary of the report before we go to questions from members.
Thank you, Chair. The biodiversity and green spaces, space management. Summary report 1.1 to inform members of the recent achievements and provide further insight into the challenges faced in relation to biodiversity and green spaces management. To provide clearer understanding of how we are responding to Section 6 responsibilities through the proactive development and management of open spaces as designated within the Open Space Strategy. Point 2, the recommendations. This report to be noted and debated provide a critical friend challenge to the findings and support the implementation of the goals of the Merthyr Tydfil Natural Recovery Plan together with the Merthyr Tydfil Open Space Strategy. The report aims to provide and progress and review to members and give a greater knowledge and understanding of the current environmental legislation. Scrutiny is to be asked to support the current approach to achieving the goals of Merthyr Tydfil Natural Recovery Plan together with the Merthyr Tydfil Open Space Strategy. Where before 2016, local authority had to consider biodiversity, which has been a more subjective approach to this matter. As a consequence, much habitat and many species have declined or have been lost. Where we are now, we are currently in a biodiversity climate crisis in Wales, one of the world's most depleted countries. Since 1980, half of our pollinator species have declined. We have lost 87% of our wildflower meadows in less than 100 years. The Merthyr Tydfil Natural Recovery and Action Plan 2019 to 2024 document had a dual purpose. Not only did it replace the previous Merthyr Tydfil Biodiversity Action Plan 2014-2019 document, but also represents the S6 plan in accordance with the Welsh Government Guidance, Environmental Wales Act 2016, Part 1. Guidance for Section 16, the biodiversity and resilience of the ecosystem's duty. Where we want to be is the work to date has been small scale, limited by the amount of external funding we get and resources available. Another limited factor has been the public acceptance of changes in the way the public open spaces are being maintained. For instance, reduced grass cutting frequencies. This is often seen as neglect or lack of maintenance. What I like to say on the report is biodiversity is a variety of plant and animal life in the world. Previously, we had to consider biodiversity in the Merthyr Tydfil Local Biodiversity Action Plan. Now, the Environmental Act S66 requires all local authorities to maintain and enhance how we now have a new Merthyr Tydfil Natural Recovery Action Plan, which gets sent to the Wales government to show how we are helping towards biodiversity. As you can see in appendix section 1, priority habitats, including native woodlands, heathlands, wetlands, and rivers and streams. In section 2, priority species from bats, hares, squirrels, many other mammals, as well as fish, plants, and also the dreaded knotweed. As we look at number 3, that's departments. Departments within the council all works on the biodiversity, from planning and countryside to housing, where houses are being built, social services in the reuse, recycle plant. These are all doing things. Also in learning, schools have a lot to do with biodiversity. Many schools have taken up the mantle of doing their own biodiversity and have a lot of support by our biodiversity team. I there so move.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any questions from members? Councillor Clive Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Got a few questions on the report. On page 11, or it's page 3 for some people. On the right-hand side of that report, under heading progress throughout 2020-21, it refers there to the Cwm Taf Fechan Woodland Management Plan 2019-2024. Can one of the officers tell me how much money has been spent in that woodland in the last 3 to 4 years?
I don't think we have that information, unfortunately, Councillor. We should probably try and find out and get back to you on that.
Oh yeah. So the last 3-4 years, in terms of grant funding, it's very much changed from what it used to be. So from 2019, Welsh Government funding changed to what is called now the Local Places for Nature, where before it used to be a Welsh Government grant, before that it used to be an NRW grant. So in terms of funding certain areas now within Merthyr, it's become extremely restricted because of Welsh Government guidelines now. What we do try and do is still do woodland management around the borough with volunteers, but these days our kind of staff time is all towards the Welsh Government's grants that we put in. I can certainly find out information there. I know personally, I've not spent any money on that woodland.
Thank you for that answer. That's what I thought. I know we've had problems with COVID and that's affected everything, but I know the area, and having walked there, it doesn't seem to me as if anything has been done there for quite some time. And perhaps whilst I'm asking this question, can you confirm that I understand there's a trust that looks after that area? Am I correct?
Are you talking at Taffecken?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
So-
Tavecken covers a pretty wide area.
Yeah. So currently at the moment, the Wildlife Trust are the ones who are managing Taffecken. I know in terms of council money, we haven't. The Wildlife Trust use their own money to manage Taffecken Nature Reserve. There is a meeting in 2 weeks' time with our own arborist and the Wildlife Trust, because we've got massive problems with ash dieback. So our own arborist is going to be in conjunction with the Wildlife Trust walking that route to see. The biggest problem we have with Taffecken Nature Reserve is there's a lot of trees that shouldn't be there. So we've got to manage it in a way. So the ash is obviously a huge problem. So we're looking at that in terms of safety measures. I would say half of the site is full of turkey oak, which is not native. So with NRW, the Wildlife Trust and ourselves, we have to make a plan going forward for the future. Duncan, who is the reserves officer there at the moment, absolutely fantastic, has a plan, what their volunteers do weekly. At the moment, there's under new kind of guidance because they're renewing their lease. So the boundary is going to change too. But I can probably get information from the Wildlife Trust, possibly how much money they've put into woodland management in Taffecken since 2019, because we don't hold that information, because obviously it's under their agreement, a 99-year agreement, that they do the work. We're not obligated to get that information. They do share obviously information with us, and we do have a better relationship with them at the moment than we have in the last couple of years because of COVID.
Thank you for that quite comprehensive answer. That's very interesting. I've got a few other questions, and it's on page 13 or page 5 for other people. Right on the top right-hand side, second paragraph down, refers to the meadow management plan for Cyfarthfa Meadows. Can somebody tell me exactly where Cyfarthfa Meadows is, please? I've never come across the term.
The meadows are right at the back
Of
of Cyfarthfa Park.
all right.
So there's 4 meadows there, and each one is very different. Then you've got the path that runs through, and what's the football field behind? That's not being used. You've got the Brincayo, and then what's the other one that they do all the kind of monster trucks one?
That's the football pitch.
Yeah. Is that called something? I don't know. what it's called.
Pond.
Okay, so the meadows are kind of enclosed if you were walking at the top. Each section is very different. The first 2, a couple of years ago, probably 2018-19, NRW came with myself, the previous ecologist, and Tom Bramley, and we had it assessed, and the 2 have become of triple SI status. The other 2 haven't, because they're very different, because they're quite wet. We have an agreement with the local commons, head of commons, isn't it, Hugh, who comes in and then cuts the grass for us, but that's where they are.
Right. Sorry, because it's in my ward and I didn't know exactly what it was. Thank you. I'm still on the same page, page 30, page 5 for others. On the left-hand side, right at the very bottom, it refers to a river clean at Aberfan, Quickersand, Pentrafach, Taffechan and Merthyr Town Centre, MTCPC, Keep Wales Tidy, Woodland Trust and Active Woods. Is there any reason why the NRA are not involved there? Because they're not mentioned. And I was under the impression that they are responsible, amongst other things, for rivers.
NRW, do you mean?
NRW, sorry.
So they have been involved in some river cleans in the past, but generally they don't get involved in river cleans. That comes down to usually ourselves and local kind of charity groups around to do that kind of work. The only time we'd get NRW involved is like with water consent management, because we're just cleaning it. We wouldn't. I know in the past they have, especially Pen Park, they've had like some kind of staff days out where they do clean some of our streams, the kind of water management side, the environment side, because obviously NRW is split up into 3 sections now. But they have come down in the past, but generally we wouldn't ask them to kind of come down because we use local groups in the area.
I just was under the impression that NRW were had to be involved with the responsibility that they've got under the various acts for the river and clearly the river sides, but they're not by the sound of it.
Again, it depends, because with the rivers, a lot of the rivers are not, so it's a tricky one because the river beds sometimes are owned by fishing clubs, not necessarily NRW. They're more involved in if there's like sewage that goes into the river, then obviously they need to kind of come and check. If there's certain species in the river, so if we've got otter and we've got otter death, things like that, they'll get involved in. They write to us if there's a water kind of framework change, so say Bike Park Wales, you know, with obviously the new kind of developments that are going up there, if they're offloading any water that comes down into the River Taff, then obviously they'll consult us and ask us.
I don't want to prolong this, but obviously the public and myself will see this, but litter, supermarket baskets, and a host of other things are thrown in rivers. I was always under the impression that it was whereas the river authorities were responsible for ensuring, but clearly it's not. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I might have some other questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm Colbrand, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies for not being in the chamber this afternoon, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. Just a few questions. First of all, on page 14 of the report, with me, because I need to expand my screen. No, I've lost the page for a second. There's a section in it where it relates to £500,000 being spent on the restoration of the Taff Bargoed Valley landscape. Is this the silting or is this another project?
Yeah, that is the silting up project, cleaning up the silt in the river catchment.
And that work's all been completed now, has it?
Yeah, as I understand it, yes.
Okay, thank you. Where are we on the SPF funding for the 3 extra posts? Is there any progress on that at the moment?
Evening, Councillor. There's no update on the SPF funding. We have put the application in. We've done some job descriptions, so we are basically ready to go with that. And as soon as we get confirmation, we can take that forward. I think discussions are going on, obviously, with the council's financial situation at the moment. Things are being looked at, but we've had no confirmation to date.
So those posts are fully grant funded, are they?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. I have got another question, but I'll pass it over to someone else at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bill Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and give my apologies if chairing the meeting the first time. I got the touch of the flu and I don't want to pass it on. But I won't sneeze, you're all going to sick with him. First last question on page 12. And it's on the south. On the other side is the Prince Charles area. Can we confirm that's been completed? Everything's going tidy. Part of the vandalism.
So everything is being completed now. We've even replaced trees that were snapped this year as well with new LMP money.
Great, thank you very much. On the comments on the park and everything else, are we going to have staff working in the park? Because sometimes you go in the park and we'll go regular 3 gardeners, 1 gardener, 2 labourers. The clean-up boys are going down well, we're doing it tidy. But is enough staff overall to take it forward the way we want to on new report up? Because it's surprising what's happening, what they're doing in the park and what reports you got there.
Are you talking about the public parks, or are you talking specifically about the Prince Charles Hospital?
Quarther Park itself. Sorry, perhaps I got confused. Quarther Park itself.
Yeah, well, you know, if we're talking about biodiversity, we have put in for an extra 2 staff under the SPF funding. Obviously, at the moment, there's only Tom and Jill working on the ground projects as such. But if we get the SPF funding, we'll have the public liaison officer and the 2 operatives. So we will have an additional resource there, which we can use to implement some of these biodiversity schemes that we've got planned.
So at the end of the day, we are going to have staff as we speak.
Well, that's debatable. You know, we can always say that we haven't got enough staff because standards have dropped over the years because of the austerity measures, and you know, parks aren't what they used to be, and that's just not our authority. That's across the board. You know, in an ideal world, yes, we would have extra gardeners, but that's something that you know we can't do at the moment, not without any additional funding.
Thank you, Jill. On the comments Councillor Jones made on, we've got a bit of part of the land there at the back of Lakeside Gardens on the way to Prince Charles Hospital. I don't see any comments in yet about it. Where the fire service putting money into LCL, as they call it, stop the fire breaking.
Are you talking about Greg?
As we go past the park, it's as you come out, drive up, and it's on your left-hand side, and it's homeland with the board working and by the roundabout.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Greg there. So again, unfortunately, COVID has played a huge part in that. So Healthy Hillsides, they're actually asking for an extension on their grant to further develop that area. The biggest problem, obviously, with that is they had secured funding, and then because of the heads of the Valley Road, basically about a third of the site was taken off them what they intentionally wanted to do. The fire service are involved there, obviously cutting fire breaks to help with both the habitat and obviously the risk of fire towards the public. They've had a few kind of community days there. Again, I think it's been quite difficult to get the community involved, but I think they just need that push really with communications more than anything. But the work is continuing there, and as soon as they finish, we can give you that report, because obviously we haven't had it yet either. Matt might be able to give you a bit more information on that, because Matt's more involved in that than me.
The only thing I would add to that really is to do with the A465, the dualling. Obviously, there's a lot that site's been disrupted quite a lot to put the new road in, but a lot of it will be reinstated. You know, the parts that are left following the works, and so we're hoping that we can reinstate a lot of the habitats that were there previously and join it back into the site.
So what we're looking for when the A465 is more completely bare, we coming back to it to sort things out.
Well, I think it's the responsibility of Future Valleys, the construction company who are undertaking the works on the road, and they have responsibility to reinstate all the way along the route in Merthyr, well, not route everywhere, but in Merthyr, obviously. And they've got responsibility then. I think it's a 25-year management maintenance plan that they will oversee it from the end of the works onwards. So
Okay, great, thank you.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Philip Starr.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just got a couple of points about the report itself. 6.2 in particular, you rightly state the need to regularly inform the public of what you're trying to achieve with regard to public open space, and you cite various examples of how you can actually get information out to the public, including council websites, social media platforms, presentations, etc. Is that sufficient? Because speaking from a community group point of view, one of the frustrations that we often hear from members of the public is that they don't know what's going on. They don't look at the website. They don't use social media platforms, especially if they're of a certain age. Is there any other way that you can perhaps try and engage with a wider selection of the public to explain to them exactly what the plans are for public open spaces?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and that's why we've actually put in the SPF funding for that public engagement officer. We feel that's important, and that role is going to be crucial because we don't do enough of it at the moment because of resources, obviously. But with that person in post, they will be carrying out, visits to schools, etc. Sessions with ward members, general information. Yeah, so that's the idea. The things in the report, as you say, are a start, and that's what we can do at the moment without the additional staff. But if the SPF funding does come in, then we'll be taking that forward.
Right, thank you very much. And one other point as well. On 6.5, just like a bit of clarification about one of the phrases in that paragraph, and it starts with further support from members will be required. Is there any indication of what that further support might entail? Because there's nothing, if you read on, as to what that may actually turn out to be.
I think that refers to the way people perceive what biodiversity is going forward. I think we all have ideas on what that should look like, and in the past we've met some obstructions, not from not all members, but some members and members of the communities as well. They see, I think I put it in the report, that they see the reduction in frequency of cutting, for instance, as neglect. And that's a perception which has to be changed over time. And I think that's what we were asking for there, is for the members to gain more insight with knowledge in some of the sessions we've planned, and to give us some support on what we need to do next. When we're getting criticised for the grass hasn't been cut, we need to, officers as well as members, need to be supportive in that, and state what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve with biodiversity.
Yeah, I agree fully with that. And I think it is frustrating if people don't have the bigger picture or an awareness of the picture. And as you said earlier, the employment possibly of a public engagement officer would go a long way towards alleviating that issue. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. That's enough for me.
Can I just come back to your first question in relation to engaging with the public in forms other than digital, just to remind members really that when the current open space strategy was adopted, we carried out a significant amount of face-to-face engagement with the public. So we took the opportunity to hold sessions with various community groups. We went to different events in the town, as well as during the LDP process as well. So I think the importance of face-to-face engagement certainly isn't lost on us, and we'll always take the opportunity to do that.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions to on the overarching report. Under 7.1, I'll read part of that. In order to spur on enthusiasm and support for future project, a series of site visits is arranged that illustrate the changes made and the challenges faced. I presume the site visit you're talking about are just for the scrutiny committee members, or is that for other members? Is it going to be widened to all other members of the local authority?
I think initially it was meant for scrutiny members because that was the specific question, a scrutiny question on they'd like to see the type of work that's going on, but I can't see why that couldn't be broadened, you know, to have better member understanding.
And through you, Chair, what time of the year are we talking about these site visits being arranged, and how many are we talking about?
Well, I think you've got to think to yourself now what kind of habitats you want to see. So if you're looking for grassland sites, your best time is going to be spring, summer. If you're looking for wetland sites, then maybe autumn, winter. So I put a list of places that, you know, you can all visit whenever you want to. But obviously I need to know specifically, because again, biodiversity is so huge. Are you looking at species or are you looking at habitats? Because each one is different. Like Matt this year, I believe it was, with the Heads of the Valley Road, found a site that we have marsh fritillaries. I secured funding to put an extensive amount of fencing around, but you're not going to see anything at this time of year. So I guess that question is up to the members what you actually want to see. Because it's a year-round thing, biodiversity.
So to pursue that, are you suggesting that an email be sent to all council members asking those questions? Because I don't think you'll get a true reflection from just a few of the members here.
Yeah. Can I come in there? That's why we've put in the meetings so that all councillors can learn about the biodiversity and they can have a great understanding, as the report says. And so from that, if others want to come out to have a look at the sites, in fairness to the two in the team, they've done excellent, beyond. So if you go around the sites and seeing the signs that they put around, and I know Jill have made a lot of them signs last year herself, so I'll be honest, that's why we want to engage with all members so that they have a great understanding.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just to add to that, there's council work that we do, and then there's grant work that we do. So we can show you either, which is fine. And then there might be a suggestion of, can you let me know what is going on in your particular ward? So if you're interested in just your ward, by all means, you can email me and I can meet you and tell you if there's things that have happened in your ward. But obviously it's just myself and Tom that work on the ground. We make miracles out of just 2 staff members, but we do try to work across the whole of the borough.
Right, thank you. I'm still on the same page there, just to confirm, because the questions have been asked and answered, but under 7.3 it says to confirm SPF funding. Rob, you've said that we haven't heard about that yet. And I presume that the next slide down, recruiting new staff, procuring a vehicle, equipment and tools, is all dependent on how much SPF funding we get. If that is the case, have you got any idea when the announcement's going to be made, if at all?
Yeah, you are correct that the recruitment and the vehicles, etc., is dependent on the SPF funding. I'm not sure when the announcement is going to be made. I don't know if the director knows.
No, I think our regen department are leading on it, and we were expecting to have heard by the 31st of October, but I understand that we're still waiting for the letter from UK government.
Right. And how much funding, Chair, are we?
Well, I
talking
think
about?
as an authority, it's in the region of 23 million. Thank you. Yeah, it's spread across obviously, a number of themes and a number of areas. But as Rob said earlier, we submitted our funding application for a number of things, one of which being biodiversity.
I'll be interested to find out when the answer comes for that in the current financial situation we find ourselves in the UK. On the same page, under 8, contribution to wellbeing objectives, and the third one down there, of the 6, it says reimagining the approaches and entrances to green space to provide a more welcoming experience. Can you give me an example of one in Merthyr Tydfil, so that I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure.
So this is really Tom's open space. I'll try and give you a few examples. One of the examples that we've noticed in a few of the parks are the old signs, where previously in the past there's been old kind of leaflets put in and they're not very welcoming. So myself and Tom have tried to put new signage into quite a few of the parks. And in terms of a welcoming space, we're looking at planting and being more creative with what planting we have. Probably one of the best examples that I can think of is Treharris Park. We took down the old sign there and put in a really beautiful oak sign. Myself and Tom designed the sign to incorporate what Treharris Park is in terms of birdsong, in terms of the trees that are there, and we put a lovely kind of Welsh poem in. We've planted the bank that again never used to be cut properly. In springtime, it's just like a meadow of different bulbs and spring plants. It's quite beautiful. Some of the trees that were being taken down because they were dead and diseased, we then resculpted them, and they're beautiful, beautiful art sculptures now in the park. Where Treharris Park never really got much attention, on social media, we started going, where's this park? People were coming all over to just visit the park. So for us, we haven't got the money to do what I guess old park keepers used to do. So we're trying to reinvent in a way that we can manage, because again, there's not much staff on the ground. But when you walk into a park, you feel welcomed. Hope that makes a little bit of sense.
Okay, that's a very good example. Thank you. Can I go back, Chair, to the appendices on page 15, 7 brothers, and on the left-hand side, the third dot down, it refers to tomato growing in abandoned telephone boxes in Bedlinog. Very interesting. We see these telephone boxes all over the country now not used. Is that likely to be expanded, or is it just only applicable to Bedlinog?
It was no, it could have been anywhere. Unfortunately, Malcolm Coldman can tell you this one. So it was very successful, and then the old abandoned phone box was taken away.
Oh, right.
So there was a few around Merthyr at the time, and I remember they got in touch with us because some of them were listed, and some weren't. So the ones that weren't, we looked at trying to utilize them in a way for food growing, or maybe put books in, or a defibrillator, something like that. Malcolm can tell you It was very, very successful. Even people in the shops were, I believe, watering them for us.
Right.
It would be a fantastic thing to do borough-wide, but at the time, I think that's back in 2018-19, they took away a lot of the phone boxes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Clive, can I just interrupt there a sec?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a fantastic project, organised by Tom Bramley, was behind it. It was a disused phone box in the middle of the high street. We just took it over. We didn't tell anybody, and we planted tomatoes and peppers and all sorts in there. As Jill said, it was real community engagement. It was outside a pub. The regulars from the pub would come out and water the tomato plants every night and make sure no one damaged them. And then about a week before they were due to be harvested, start harvesting, BT come and remove the phone box.
God.
So it was a bit unfortunate, but they left the plants on the pavement. They just lifted the box over them, and other residents took the plants home. So it didn't go to waste. The plants were, and the tomatoes were used and enjoyed by the residents. But it's just a shame we weren't given the option to buy the phone box, because shortly after that, BT started selling them to residents for £1.
Right.
So had they done that, we could have bought the phone box. But,
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you for that. And my other question, it's a general one. That's what, when I read that about the tomato growing, we mentioned earlier on in the meeting about planting wildflowers, and you see this in some roundabouts, but we got quite a few roundabouts in County Borough, Merthyr Tydfil. Is there any chance of planting some wildflowers perhaps on the edges of the roundabout to make it some visitors coming to Merthyr seeing this for the first time, I would have thought would be of interest?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. But again, it's, we are restricted by budgets and resources. A lot will be dependent on this new team. And that team then will be working on the open spaces strategy and some of the projects we've got in there. And I'm sure there's some wildflower schemes in that in that document. So yes, we can do it, but it does require additional resources and money.
Well, chairing, and this has happened, I'm sure, in Merthyr Tydfil, what about businesses or community groups sponsoring something like that on a particular roundabout?
Again, anything's possible, but it does take a resource to do that. With this public liaison or whatever you want to call it, that would be something that they could look into, get additional sponsorship, roundabout sponsorship, etc. We are thin on the ground, and to do that, it does involve work.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Can I just jump in there as well? I mean, one of the things people look at when it comes to wildflowers is the pretty kind of poppies, which are annuals. So in some ways, we're trying to get away from that because they're not sustainable. Every year you have to turn up the ground because poppies like that disturbed ground. So if we're trying to look at wildflowers, really we should be looking at what's native and what can thrive in our own soils here. We're lucky in Merthyr that we've got like shale, coal, slag, everything like that, which wildflowers love. But again, it comes down to maintenance. Are we looking at the showy ones just so we get tourism here, which again is staff, maintenance, budget? Or are we looking to increase our own wildflower meadows that we already have in the soil, which means the change of grasslands? So yes, it'd be nice to do some areas just to get public interest. I think it's a case of making sure that we're not taking away what is already special here to begin with, and choosing areas if we're doing it for a tourism. But some areas in the borough, obviously these trunk road agency, they're doing their own management, not us. And then I guess it's a case of the areas that we are talking about roundabouts. We've got to think of high vis with staff going on those areas and keep safety measures. One of the big schemes that we're doing this year is Dowless High Street is being changed. We've just had like a £350,000 grant. Declan's been involved, so Paula as well, and Di. So they're all informed of that scheme. It will be huge to Merthyr. Again, it'll be a first. But what we're trying to do is, in a way, come away from that public perception of what wildflowers are and actually bring them back to what really is wildflowers.
Malcolm Colbrand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on that, I do remember a few years ago, particularly Caerphilly planted lots and lots of wildflowers, but they've stopped doing that now because, as Jill said, I think they're very high maintenance. They're doing every year and obviously very expensive. They look nice for a while, but unfortunately it doesn't last. So perhaps when we do ours, we can do something a bit more sustainable that will last a lot longer. Which also comes back onto the cut and collect, which I understand part of that was to encourage wildflowers. Did we have much progress on that this year? And did we buy a smaller machine to do smaller areas as well as the larger areas?
Yeah, if you remember, Councillor, we chose 6 large sites and 10 small sites for cut and collect. Now, the 6 large sites have been done with the larger machine. The small tractor was grant funded, and we did actually buy the machine, but the tractor, because of supply issues, we still haven't had the small tractor. So some of the small sites have been cut and collect with the larger machine, but there are some sites which we can't do with the existing machinery. So we're still waiting for that tractor, basically. That hasn't been delivered, although it has been ordered quite some time ago, and that's due to it started when COVID was about, I think, and supply issues, steel shortages, etc. We haven't had that tractor yet.
Okay, thank you. So
Can I just
yeah,
add to that as well? Sorry, Malcolm. Over the last couple of years, since we started doing the biodiversity sites and managing them differently, so cutting less often and later in the season, I've gone out and surveyed each of the biodiversity sites just to have a sort of general count of how many species have come up. And it's obvious to me that they're already successful in that prior to the change in management, we were cutting them, I don't know, multiple times a year, I don't know how many exactly. But that wasn't allowing anything to grow up and flourish. But now we've changed the regime. You're seeing all sorts of things coming through, and all sorts of invertebrates using the site. So I'd say all those sites that we've changed the management on are already a great success.
Well, that's good to hear. Thanks for that. And I think, as Rob mentioned earlier, I think if we engage with residents and explain to them exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it, 95% of them are fully on board with it and fully understand. But it is just down to all of us, officers and members, to get this message across to residents. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you to Gillian and Tom Brownlee for putting this report together. And thank you to Gillian, Matt, Rob, Councillor David Hughes and Judith for answering the questions. Is there any comments from members? No comments? Okay. Sorry, Malcolm Colbrand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just keep on with the good work, really, guys. You're doing a fantastic job with very limited resources. We need to get the message out how important biodiversity is to all of us. Not everybody gets it, but with education and further input from us, hopefully they will. Obviously, with COP27 coming up at the moment and the focus on global warming, this is all part of that message. So we really need to all be getting that out there. So I say carry on doing the great work, and I hope you get your grant funding and your extra posts.
Thanks, Malcolm. Just to let you know as well, this year I have funded a graphic designer to do a leaflet, which will also go on our council website, about grassland management and the importance. So I'm going to try and get so many printed, so when every member gets a resident complaining, they can give them my little leaflet, basically.
Councillor Bill Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say this report, I opened my eyes because I didn't know how much work you do overall, how much is involved, because you go through it, it's unbelievable. Jill made a comment early on about people going out and look at it, and the areas you walk around. Now we got one cracking area in the Gun, that's Coulter Lane, and that's from the old Glenwarren Bars up towards Gurner Signal Road. But people are afraid to use it. It's a security problem we've got on these lanes, because anti-social issues, and the kids, they're not kids, are they? People wander around and people are afraid to use the countryside now in certain areas. So can we look at that in such a way that you make it safer for people to wander about? Because that's what the countryside is, isn't it? Not just walking. You walk in, you want to see what's around the next corner and over the next stile and bits and pieces. So it's like a wandering area. And that's the problem we got in this area, because people sometimes won't walk from A to B on certain times. So that's a big issue got. But overall, I think this report is cracker. And I would like to see this report go back to the members. So have a training day to inform all members what you do, because it's not just for the scrutiny to look at this. This will go to council, people might read it, but at the end of the day, people want councillors to be more involved, how to change everything. So perhaps you can have an open day for all the councillors, meet in the town hall for you to go through it.
Yeah, we certainly can, Bill. In terms of Goitre Lane, many years ago, myself, previous staff, Tom as well, Keep Wales Tidy, lots of other groups. We planned, men's group were highly involved in Goitre Lane. We did a lot of scrub clearance. We did some of the river kind of clearance down there. I had ridiculous amounts of needles that, you know, myself had to pick up and put in boxes. It's a troublesome area, that particular lane. I know in terms of that site, I know Jeremy and Lee Davis, I've tried to speak to the housing, I think it's Merthyr Valley Homes, or it might be Merthyr Homes, which I'm not quite sure which housing has it. They have spoken to residents there. I know in the past when Keep Wales Tidy have had skip days, a lot of the rubbish that is chucked down the banks by Goitre Lane actually goes in the skips rather than the site itself. I would hope with my funding that I get, you know, on each year from Welsh Government, again, I got to apply for it. These are areas that we can put forward to put into the LMP grants. They are quite difficult because they're about getting people closer to nature. So sometimes they would question that particular site because you've got old remnants and ancient woodland there. Why would we do anything there anyway? Because it's already thriving for biodiversity. It's just what you're questioning is the safety. So part of the open space strategy is about safety and getting people out into these areas, which is, again, goes to the welcoming spaces. But you've also got to be mindful, if you're asking for things like lighting, then we're subjected to legislation and obviously how that affects species.
Can I come back, Chair? Jill, I know you mentioned Goitre Lane. Goitre Lane being cleaned twice a year, and if we had to pay, if the council had to pay for it, it would cost them millions. Simple as that. We know that. But we talked to Merthyr Valley Homes. Do you talk to Merthyr Valley? Can you match the funding with Merthyr Valley Homes? What funding you get towards it? Because we talked to Merthyr Valley Homes. I know two of the directors walked up. And we give them a again. There's two women walking up. I said, you shouldn't walk up before 12 o'clock because otherwise, you know what it's like. And it's a dangerous place. certain times of day. So, you know, if we can match the funding, working with all the homes to improve it, and with all the homes that have put fencing on the back of the houses to make sure that nobody throwing rubbish over the top. So, you know, if you can help us out and support something about, and we'll support it on the line.
So one of the things I'm trying to do as part of the Merthyr Biodiversity Partnership that I run 4 times a year, we've now invited obviously both the housing associations in Merthyr to come along. Again, whether they come along, that's up to them or not. But I guess it's an insight for them to see what other people in the borough are doing. It's communication at the end of the day. It's getting them to understand, and it all goes back to obviously engagement with communities. So the more we can engage, the more education that we can, slowly we can make change. But as you appreciate, Bill, it's quite hard, that particular area in Merthyr. I mean, we were hoping to get that part of the active travel plan. So where we changed obviously the Prince Charles Fields, where you can now actually walk, cycle, you can use a disability kind of wheelchair, anything like that. We'd like to link up more and more and more, but it's a difficult situation to try and the motive and people and staff and resource, but we will do it.
Caleb, could we try to put a cycle track from Prince Charles down there across, down Gudger Lane, down to the Banana area and a penny out of me? So that might work. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you again all. Any officers who will no longer be involved in this meeting may now leave if you wish. Thank you all. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 5, the replacement LDP 2016 to 2031 annual monitoring report 2022. Today's report has been written by Craig Watkins, and the Cabinet member, Councillor David Hughes, will now give a brief summary of the report before we go to questions from members.
The LDP annual monitoring report, AMR, is required to be submitted to the Welsh Government in October each year. The AMR assesses the extent to which the adopted local development plan strategy, policy insights are being delivered, and provides monitoring data to inform the ongoing policy research. This report provides a summary of the second AMR for the replacements LDP 2016 to 2031, which was adopted in January 2020 for information purposes. A copy of the AMR has also been published on the Council website as required by the Welsh Government. The recommendations are that this report be noted and debated. The introduction and background to this: in Merthyr County Borough Council Replacement and Local Development Plan 2016-31 was adopted in January 2020 and forms the statutory land use plan for the county borough, excluding the area that lies between Brecon Beacons National Park. The Plan and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 and Welsh Government policy require the Council to monitor and review the adopted LDP. An annual monitoring report, AMR, must be published and submitted to the Welsh Government by the end of each October. The 2022 AMR has attached as Appendix A to this report. It just follows where we were, follows the 2015 AMR. The Council prepared a review report and that identified key issues in the implementation of the adopted LDP 2006 to 2021. In particular, this was identified there were issues in realising the enhanced growth strategy of the adopted plan in terms of level of growth. Consequently, the review report recommended a full review LDP and the replacement LDP be prepared that addresses the issue identified. Where we are now, the MR records progress against the indicators set out in the monitoring framework of the LDP, which tracks the performance of the plan policy and associated allocations. The performance against individual indicators is summarised at Appendix A of the AMR. A detailed analyst is provided of the main body of the report. The AMR records progress against indicators set out in the monitoring framework of the adopted LDP, which tracks the performance of the plan policy and allocations. The 2022 AMR indicates that most aspects of the plan and its strategies are working well, and that the policies of the replacement LDP are being implemented effectively in particular. The majority of the development, likely 1.5%, has been permitted on previous developed land. Affordable housing continues to be delivered in accordance with the target included in the monitoring framework. Policies that seek to protect the environment and historical destinations have been implemented effectively, with no development granted contrary to the relevant policies. There are, however, some aspects of the LDP that are not working as well as being implemented as effectively as they could. These include overall housing delivery, which has dropped below the level requirement at this point in the plan period, with the completion of 20% lower than it is needed to be. Targets not being met in relation to delivering the allocation of employment land and the number of jobs delivered. A target not being met in relation to the improvement of priority open spaces using funding gained through the planning system. The target of the each generation renewable energy development across the county borough is not being met. In order to build upon these initial successes of the replacement LDP, the planning department will need to work closely with both internal and external stakeholders to develop the objectives and the overall strategy of the plan. Some of the key project areas where there is collaboration, which will be critical, include working with colleagues in strategic housing department and registered social landlords to increase the delivery of housing. Work with the states and regeneration to deliver strategic development projects such as Merthyr Tydfil Town Centre. Delivering high quality open space, sports and play provision throughout the work through working with the street scene department, helping to ensure that the sustainable community for learning programme is delivered as efficiently as possible throughout early engagement with education and other stakeholders. Given the context of COVID-19 pandemic and wider economic situation, delivery of all types of development were likely to be impacted upon during this monitoring period. How these issues impact upon the delivery of the LDP strategy will be key considerations in short, medium and long term, and will need to be considered carefully in the subsequent AMRs. Okay, there move.
Thank you. Now we'll go to questions from members. Councillor Malcolm Colburn, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to the house building, Judith, you say we're behind target. Can you give us an indication of how far behind we are on target, and do you think we can recover and get back on track?
Yeah, well, it says in the report we're 20% behind at the moment. We are looking at schemes that are coming forward. The Heartlands up in Dowlas is one of those. There are others. The one up in Clynrodin, which is be starting quite soon. So there are some in the pipeline. I'm sure Judith can give some other ones.
Yeah, Councillor Craig will give you a bit more detail now in terms of the trajectory that is in the local development plan and where we are with those sites.
Thank you, Judith. Yeah, at present, we delivered 561 dwellings since the start of the plan period in 2016, and the target outcome at this point in time was 705. So we're about 20% behind where we need to be, and there's a reasonable chance that we can sort of pick up the slack in Merthyr, partly because of the size of the county borough. In terms of, we're not some of the bigger authorities where you're looking to build sort of over 1,000 houses a year. For us to go from building the sort of 60, 70 that we've achieved over the last year or so, up to the target of sort of between 150 and 200 is achievable, with particularly with some of the larger sites now looking to come forward, as Councillor Hughes mentioned, such as the Clynrodin scheme, progress being made in terms of Project Heartland and the Hoover strategic regeneration area as well.
Okay, thank you. I just worry that with the cost of living crisis and rising interest rates, that perhaps house builders won't be so keen to be building. Obviously, that's going to have an effect on our targets.
Yeah, it's always going to be a consideration, because, like I said, in terms of achieving our targets, the sort of national volume house builders are going to be contributing a significant proportion of completions. But again, I think with the sort of more moderate strategy, or level of growth, sorry, that we went for in the strategy for this plan, there is scope to pick up the slack a little bit easier than the previous version of the LDP, which was looking to build over 250 dwellings a year. And this is now the second AMR. Next year's will be the third, and from January 2024, we will have to commence a review of the plan anyway. So at that point, then we effectively go back to the start and start preparing the next version of the plan then.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pursue, because I had the same question as Councillor Colbron about the completions. On page 79 of the report, page 29 for others, the plan there is to have 2,196 completions by April 2031. That's just over 8.5 years away. With all the problems we've got currently, UK-wide, and they're not going to disappear overnight. Is it a reasonable ask that we can achieve that without any shadow of doubt? But you said, Craig, that we can review that in a few years' time. So are you saying that because of circumstances that we know of now, and there might be other factors that are in the future, that we can adjust that figure?
Yeah, in terms of the sort of review of the LDP, there's a statutory requirement that we have to review it 4 years after adoption, so January 2024. Dependent on the findings of each individual AMR, we could trigger an early review of the plan. At this point, even though we are 20% sort of behind where we need to be, we didn't feel it was appropriate to review the plan early at present, given in, like I said, in the grand scheme of things, the numbers we're talking about are not huge numbers of houses across Wales. Significant numbers in Merthyr Tydfil, don't get me wrong, but like I said, with progress being made on some of the larger sites, and I suppose the key thing in the key site really in terms of this strategy is the regeneration of the Hoover site, and there's sort of work going on in the background to sort of bring that forward. And if we can sort of get that to come forward along the timescales that we anticipate, then that will contribute sort of 20% of our total provision by the end of the decade, effectively. Yeah.
So 4 years ago, and obviously you're in the policy side of things, trying to anticipate what's going to happen, I wouldn't have thought that it would have entered your mind or any of the planners that there would be an energy crisis, cost of living crisis, a major financial crisis, and the first European war since 1945, all happening at the same time, which clearly, not only us, but every local authority in the United Kingdom has been affected by it. So that's why I asked the question. Surely things are not going to disappear overnight, and all these problems, the snap of the fingers, gone and disappeared. So in January 2024, surely we'll have to look at it as an authority, like other authorities, realistically, to say where we are at that particular time. And whilst you're giving an answer, because I was going to ask the question as to where we are with the Hoover site, can you remind me how many properties we are envisaging being built and completed there?
Yeah, first of all, in terms of the Hoover factory site, it's allocated for 440 dwellings, alongside some other smaller pieces of development, such as a park and ride, I think nearly 2 hectares of open space, and improvements to the existing train station. In terms of, yeah, I think it's the perma crisis situation that we find ourselves in. I think you've seen it called that in the news in the last week or so. And those sort of wider contextual issues are something that we consider in each individual AMR. And I think given how quickly things have moved this year, I think there was a feeling that we do just need to wait and see at this point in time to see what happens, because one of the things that we'll have to consider when we are preparing the new version of the plan, whether it's next year or the year after we start it, is that we are sort of quite limited in the county boroughs to what we can do. Land is quite sort of scarce, particularly for development. So we don't want to sort of rush any decisions in terms of what we're looking to do over the next 15 years if the situation can not resolve itself completely, but sort of even out a little bit over the next year or 18 months.
Yeah. Going back to the Hoover's site, because I think you did say in the run-up to the point you were making that things are changing there. By the sound of it, there's movement with different issues and different people. Is that like gaining as
the council at the moment is in discussions with the landowner,
right,
as to what is going to be the most appropriate way to bring the site forward. There was a change in the sort of parent company of Hoover's. I think it was around about the time we were adopting the plan back in 2020, but sort of the relationships have sort of been restarted there, and discussions are active at the moment.
Right. So that will result at some time in planning applications coming before the council in the not too distant future, am I right?
Fingers crossed, yes.
Okay. My other question is on page 71 of the report. It is page 21 for others. And I read it there. The amount of jobs delivered per annum will need to increase significantly to meet the target of 1,251 jobs by March 2026. Obviously, in the context of what I've just said from the earlier question, all the circumstances there, I would have thought still apply to trying to, it seems to me that that's not far away, less than 2.5 years. Is it realistic to expect us to reach that figure of 1,251?
Yeah, the employment, the delivery of employment land and buildings is a little bit different to the way housing is delivered. Excuse me, in that they do tend to come forward in sort of larger sort of single hits. Like for example, the application with J+ at the moment, if that was approved, that gets built up and delivered, that's one of only 4 allocated employment sites delivered. I think in terms of the actual quantity of land that we identified we needed in preparing the LDP, that single site would deliver it in its entirety. Like, so the reason we've got other sites is because we have to give the market an element of flexibility and choice as to what site's going to be developed. One issue we would have if that developed was to come forward is that it isn't a particularly jobs dense scheme. If that, I think it's around about 120 to 150 jobs they're envisaging, whereas if that site was to be developed as a sort of new industrial estate, we'd be achieving jobs at a much higher density, which would then sort of help us meet that target a little bit easier. But with our employment sites as well, you've got Courtmill Road site with the current application on. There's part of the Hoover site which is obviously tied up with the same sort of land ownership issues, and then we have a strategic site of Fossa Fran, which will only become available once the restoration program has been completed as well. Good, Chair.
Councillor Bill Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Craig, you talk to Merthyr Valley Homes, because in the Gurness it's all Merthyr Valley Homes and they're building all these single units about. You already got a bit of a policy about open spaces. So are they affected because any open land we've got up there they're building on? I know some were already built on and knocked down. But now they're building every part of the land. So is that affecting the open spaces policy as well?
The areas of open land that have been developed in the Gurness, and a couple of the sites within the last couple of years, haven't been sites that are protected in the LDP as open space. They are like you said, they are just pieces of the estate that was sort of knocked down at some point during the last 30 years. So as across the entire borough, really, it's a matter of striking that balance between developing appropriate areas of land and then protecting and improving other areas of open space. Like from the previous report, like I said, there's been a significant amount of work on the field next to Prince Charles Hospital in the Gurness. But in terms of our sort of relationship with the housing associations, myself, colleagues from estates, colleagues from development control within planning, all have monthly development meetings with Merthyr Tydfil Housing Association and Merthyr Valley's Homes to sort of go through all the sites and schemes that they're looking at, whether they're live schemes or schemes that they're looking to bring forward through pipeline development over the next few years as well.
So home spaces in the Gurness are not classed as a policy and they're just classed as MVH as building?
They're not actually allocated.
Yeah, I want to clarify, yeah, because we were uproar upheaval because the building taking the views about and everything else. So
Councillor, the majority of the land you're referring to in and around the Gurness estate, doesn't actually carry any land use designation in the plan. It isn't allocated for development and it isn't allocated as protected open space. But you know, there are pockets. You usually a playground, a sort of formal play area, will sort of provide a starting point to protect an area of open space in locations such as that. So there are some protected areas in and around the Gurness, but in terms of the use of the land in the Gurness as a whole, it may be something that come review of the plan next time around is looked at sort of more holistically in terms of redeveloping the estate, because at the moment, and I'm sure MVH would tell you this, the way the land is used overall isn't necessarily the best use of land, where you had those little pockets of blocks of buildings demolished at some point in the future. Sort of a comprehensive redevelopment of the area might be an option.
Yeah,
in the
we'll
future.
be looking at that. Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to Craig Watkins for putting this report together, and thank you to Craig, Councillor David Hughes and Judith for answering the questions of the members today. Is there any comments from the members? Councillor Clive Jones?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I think the review period is very important for this. I think you mentioned, Craig, there's one due in January 24. And there was another one due after that.
Sorry, no, so we have to commence a review no later than 4 years from adoption.
Right.
But if findings in the AMRs indicate that an early review would be required, you can trigger an early review.
Yeah, right. Because I think that it's very important in view of all the issues that are faced in this United Kingdom at the moment, that's looked at properly and realistically, because we can all look at plans, but we've got to determine what we can do with the circumstances facing us at the time. So I think that's important. I presume that review will then be coming to us and the council at some time. I'm sorry, it's a question, but it's a comment really.
Yeah, no problems. Like effectively, we would go back to the start and prepare a new plan
Right.
at that point. And like I said, all these sort of wider contextual issues will need to be considered. And yes, you're right in terms of, well, one of the tests of soundness that Welsh Government and the Planning Inspectorate, or PEDU as they know now, what to look at is the plan deliverable. So like I said, that any sort of growth that we go for, the sites we allocate, we have to demonstrate that it's all deliverable. And like I said, those wider economic circumstances are something that we need to consider as part of that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you again, everyone. Any officers who will no longer be involved in this meeting may now leave. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 6, the Forward Work Programme 2022-23. Both the Chair and the Performance and Scrutiny Officer are not in today, and I'm unaware of any changes or updates to the Forward Working Programme. Members will be notified of any updates, and if any members wish for any items to be added, can they please contact the Chair and the Scrutiny Officers. Agenda item 7, report recommendations. Did we address the recommendations in each report and have we added value? I believe we have done that, what the recommendations have asked, by noting, debating and by being a critical friend where necessary. Do any committee members want to ask or add anything? Agenda item,
It's just to agree with your comments.
okay.
I think we have done so in the circumstances, yeah.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, feedback on scrutiny activities. I'm not aware of any outstanding actions, and I'm sure the Chair and Scrutiny Officers will advise when they are available. Agenda item 9, any other business deemed urgent by the Chair? I have none.
Chair, I have brought this up before. There's at least 3 of us in the council chamber who've queried the meeting taking place on the 19th of December, because it's banging Christmas week, very close to the end of the week, and I'm still requesting that serious consideration be given to that, and possibly moving that meeting to the previous week. I think in the circumstances that should be looked at, and I have spoken to the Chair separately about it. Thank you.
I'd just like to
Thank
say,
you.
yeah, I'm happy for the meeting to be moved to the 12th, if that's what the committee want.
I did speak to, as well as yourself, as you're aware, and I believe Philip Starr as well spoke about it. We did speak in the pre-meet on Thursday evening, where we were advised by Neil that because the bookings are already in place. However, I did advise as well that you would advise the 12th was available. He would take that up with Chair and himself, obviously, and I believe Democratic Services. So I will take them notes into account for you, and obviously we'll get some results and some answers by next week.
I know there are issues about changing meetings. I mean, I've been chair of scrutiny committees and the audit committee in the past, but everything is possible, and I would have thought that that can be done, Jane. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Hopefully it will be, because I think there is a number of us who would possibly not be able to meet the meeting. So I think it would be beneficial if we could. So thank you anyway, Councillor. Mr. Phillips, start.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I support everything that Clive said. I know we talked about it in the pre-meet earlier on Thursday. If for any chance it is not possible, it does strike me when looking at the forward work programme that there are a number of items on the agenda for the 19th of December, several of which we would be likely to debate at length. And, you know, if we look down into 2023, there's a meeting on the 13th of March where there's only one item on the agenda, which is fleet management and electric vehicle update. So it seems that there is a little bit of an imbalance between the items on the agenda for the 19th of December and those that come up later on in the subsequent year. So if it isn't possible, would it be possible to remove possibly at least one of the items on the agenda for the 19th to a later meeting in 2023? That could be a compromise if it's not possible to move the date from the 19th to the 12th.
Yeah, again, I was with you on the pre-meet and that suggestion came up, which was a good idea. I think maybe there is strong feeling it needs to be moved earlier. And that would be the best option. As I said, I can feed this back, and I'm sure to the scrutiny officer and chair, and let's see what results we get. Thank you anyway. Just left me to say thank you very much for your attendance today, and I formally declare this meeting closed. Thank everyone.
All right, well done.